Bet the Board presents Stay Green. Stay Green is your first stop for all the metrics, matchups, and money-making opportunities at the track each race week. This is Stay Green, the NASCAR betting podcast. Here are your hosts, Todd Fuhrman and racing analyst Chris Werme.
Welcome into the Stay Green podcast, all NASCAR all the time, part of the Bet the Board podcast network. And then there were two races remaining in the NASCAR season. That is the definition of a marathon, not a sprint. We know two of the drivers that'll be racing for a championship in Phoenix, but there are still six drivers fighting for two spots. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by professional NASCAR bettor and my co-host on this fine program, Chris Werme. And Wormser, what a finish from Homestead, the track in the series, along with Kansas, that never disappoints when it comes to some level of excitement during the course of the 400-mile race.
I'm not sure what more you want in a playoff race. I'm
gonna go fans in the stands. In the stands is probably what NASCAR wants.
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm definitely making a push on Twitter for a group of us to go down there just to show up. So that way, like if the people of Southern Florida will not go support this NASCAR, maybe we can just, all of Twitter can go down there and just so, hey, if enough people go, maybe we'll get two races.
Spring break Homestead. Is that what you're trying to organize?
Exactly.
For grown men 30 plus spring break Homestead.
It's March Madness weekend though. That's the only problem. But I don't know what else you want other than fans in the stands. You have 3 different leaders with 2 laps to go. You have Hamlin backers so excited that he wins the restart. I thought the race was over. And Blaney just...
we were naked. Oh, at least I was naked on the 11. I can't speak to your
portfolio
as well.
Werme was naked too. Very naked. I was looking at like a shutout that day. Like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And then I'm like, oh, Blaney's got it. I was not worried about Reddick until the exit of 2 when I was like, oh, that was a good run on the bottom. And then the very fateful, I'm going to let Tyler Reddick get the top.
With older tires, nonetheless.
With older tires. I don't blame Blaney because he passed Hamlin in the middle.
Yep.
Off of 3 or into 3 and off of 4 and then made it stick down in 1. So I actually didn't think the top was going to be that fast. So it was... I mean, how like poetic was that? Like Michael Jordan's team and Tyler Reddick. This is such a cheat. It was
basically. I know no one can see what I'm doing to you as we sit here and record. It was basically a double bird to NASCAR in general, and on some level, this would be poetic justice if the 45, being the first entrant into the Final Four as a member of 2311 Racing, drives into victory lane at Phoenix, and NASCAR is painted into a proverbial corner since they've created this nightmarish situation for themselves as it pertains to charters versus open cars and everything that race team has brought to the sport from a competitive standpoint and some of the brand cachet behind everything that Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan have built together.
It's almost like Denny Hamlin just passed the ball to Tyler Reddick, and then Blaney's like, go ahead, take your shot, Jordan. And like, he just like, well, if you're going to give it to me wide open, I'm just going to take it. That's it. The basketball metaphor kind of works here. It was, you're going to give Tyler Reddick the top at Homestead to win the race. I don't give a shit who's on the inside. I like Reddick long run getting that done. And, but I don't blame Ryan Blaney. I think that there's also this element that Blaney knows that he's coming to Martinsville this week, and Reddick knows he's trash here. So,
Reddick can go out for a Sunday spin. He can meet as many Martinsville hot dogs as he wants.
Yeah.
And that's reflected in the 30-1 price tag that we'll get to a little bit later in the show. But there is no doubt in the back of the 45's mind that he had to go out there and do everything he could and then some. And as we've always talked about, at least in this instance, you could make the case that the 45 was one of the faster cars.
Yes.
But if strategy doesn't fall the right way, he ends up finishing 15th, 16th, maybe even outside the top 20.
One lap either way. One lap either way. We're talking about Vegas, where it was probably 3 laps either side of that final caution, and then you go to Homestead, 1 lap on either side of that caution. Well, I guess it could have come out earlier, but 1 lap later. If that caution comes out 1 lap later, there's no way with 2 laps or 3 laps on his tires that he has anything for those or anything for Blaney, let alone Hamlin. But had the caution come out a little bit earlier, I could see how, that would be a winning strategy for the 45. But ultimately a great race, and excited to see how this 23XI team does in the playoffs or in the Final Four, because there's definitely multiple storylines between not only the drivers, but these teams as well.
And we'll call that race recap a very short debrief for stage 1 as it pertains to everything that we saw transpire at Homestead. A tremendous race, tremendous final stage, and congratulations to Tyler Reddick, who now can race stress-free, at least this weekend, knowing he's got one of the 4 spots in Phoenix. Before we get to the breakdown, which we will at stage 3, as far as Martinsville and what some of our expectations are there, I think we've done a great job throughout the course of the postseason that we'll call stage 2, breaking down what the championship odds suggest, all about trying to identify when the optimal time to bet some of these drivers has been. And we said coming into the playoffs, we knew that the first 3 races had a level of unpredictability to them. The next 3, probably not that easy to forecast either, and that some of the numbers on very good drivers were going to drift far beyond what was readily available throughout the course of the regular season. So if we do a quick reset on what some of the numbers are, Tyler Reddick and Joey Logano, as we referenced at the top, both have clinched. We know they'll be racing in Phoenix. They're priced at 3-1. Christopher Bell and William Byron, both a little bit clearer the cut line. Christopher Bell, more margin for error than what William Byron has working in his favor. Bell plus 29, Byron plus 7. And below the cut line, it's Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott. Christopher Bell, 3-1. He's got some wiggle room. William Byron, 7-1. He's drifted past where he's been available most of the season. And the guys below the cut line, best price we've seen on Kyle Larson at 6. Denny Hamlin, 20-1. Haven't seen that all year on the 11. Ryan Blaney, 28-1. A number a little bit shorter in some spots. And Chase Elliott, 40-1 in the low end, but there are plenty of 50s and greater out there. I mean, when we're looking at market entry, I want no part of backing Tyler Reddick or Joey Logano right now until we know who the 4 racing for the championship are going to be.
It's crazy that depending on who gets into this final race, you could see them go off before the race at higher than 3-1.
100%.
If you throw Bell and Blaney in there, and those guys are going off north of 3-1, I think both of them, especially if Blaney goes out there and does what he did last year at Martinsville. So I would not touch Reddick or Logano. If you do think Bell is going to advance, you're not going to see 3-1 at Phoenix.
No, fair point. I think this is the best number you'll get on Bell, because if Bell is there, he ain't opening 3-1. And we'll go through how we power rate the 8 drivers in terms of where we think they'll be priced in a second. But I do think if you believe in Christopher Bell, and he's got the cleanest path, 34 points in Martinsville, doesn't matter what else happens, he can point his way in with a little bit margin for error.
Yeah, and I think if you're this 20 team this week, if you can go out there and qualify in the top 5, get some stage points, you may even lose ground to Larson, but if he pulls it or leads, win stage 1, like he's won stages here in the past. So, but I just think if you just kind of can wear them down, he doesn't need to be a race winning car. I think that if you're Chris Bell and you're running 6th and there's a caution, you're going to sit there and say, we're going to take the bottom. We'll give up multiple rows. What we can't have happen is fall back 5 or 6 spots, right? You're just going to be very conservative. Don't force anything. Save your stuff. I think if you're listening to this 20 radio this whole week, you're just going to hear save your stuff, save your stuff. So, but that is a decent price on Bell if you think he advances. Byron, man, just haven't seen enough out of the guy. I think his consistency is why he's here, but we haven't seen him kind of race up through the field and lead laps in a while. So, Larson, gosh, he had an eventful day last week. You texted me during the race, should I take Larson or should we live bet Larson? And I'm like, no, he's still back in 25th.
Then when he got up to 3rd, and I wish I had a little bit of that 7-1 for some protection in the portfolio.
I will say this. I was it happened so quickly that Larson started running the high line and was making up 4 or 5 tenths a lap. It wasn't until he got right on Blaney's back bumper that I even realized Larson was in second place. And it's not like I'm here twiddling my thumbs. I mean, that's how quickly.
We're not here to judge if that's indeed how you choose to spend your race day. So,
but Larson, I just don't know what happens with these two Hendrick cars if they even get to Phoenix. Now, if they're both there with Logano and Reddick, I think you make them the favorites. Even though I would probably rank Reddick a little bit better than both of them in the spring race. But here's where it does get interesting. You have Denny Hamlin at 20-1, Blaney at 28-1, and Chase Elliott at 40-1. I kind of like all of them.
Do you think Denny, if he gets to Phoenix, has a legitimate shot to win it? I'll ask that question because there's no doubt if Denny does win this week in Martinsville and breaks what has been a lengthy losing streak at a track where he's got the most wins amongst active drivers. And again, we'll get to the handicap of this individual race. That 20-1 is going to be great to be able to build around. But if we're trying to make a compelling case for the 11 being a car to beat, I don't make him. I'm more than happy to bet Tyler Reddick against the 11 in a head-to-head matchup.
Yeah,
and if the price was right, I'd bet the 22 against the 11 as well.
Yeah, I think for Hamlin to win at Phoenix, and I know that we're still a couple races from there, or at least one race away. I think he needs kind of a Larson type victory where they qualify well, and then they win a race off pit road. I think he can hold someone off for 25 or 30 laps. I don't think over the long run that the 11 car has been anywhere close to a race winning car at Phoenix really at all, ever since he kind of lost to Johnson when Johnson made it on fuel there at Phoenix and he threw the water bottle. So yes, I understand your point. I would imagine you could hedge out of the 20-1. But when it comes to actual race winning stuff, you have to look at Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott. Both of them have won at Martinsville and then gone on to win at Phoenix and win the championship. We had this conversation a little bit earlier before the show that, Chase Elliott at this 40 or 50-1, you want to back out the math on this. So just for, argument's sake, let's just say you start with $100. You want to make sure that when you're taking this outright price that you're not better, or this championship price, you want to make sure you're better off doing that than you are just parlaying the two wins. So the math on this is Chase Elliott, most places is 8-1. Yep. So your 100 goes to 8-1. If he then makes it to the championship, he's probably going to be 4-1. So then if he wins that, you're probably only getting about 32-1 on your money to win both. So anything 40 or higher, I do think Chase is a play. 50 and 60. The 60 that was available earlier in the week, I thought was a really good number. And then Ryan Blaney.
In full disclosure here, we do have some Ryan Blaney. We bet Ryan Blaney going into Homestead after practice and qualifying. We took 25-1 on him. And go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to share with other listeners.
And so you could say the same thing for Ryan Blaney. You don't want to have to just parlay these wins, because 4-1 and 4-1 is not going to give you the same as 28-1. So if you do think Ryan Blaney is going to win this week, or at least if you have an outright on Ryan Blaney or Chase Elliott at all this weekend, make sure you're sprinkling some of that bet on the championship. You cannot, those bets are hooked together, in my opinion. I wish like hell that we had done that with our Tyler Reddick last week. Because then we'd be sitting great.
Be easier to build a portfolio around. But in terms of pricing at Phoenix, I mean, we all, or at least you and me, and I think most of the NASCAR community, along with bettors, agree that Christopher Bell, if he gets there, will open the favorite. But I can't see a scenario where we're talking about Ryan Blaney opening at a price longer than, say, plus 220 at the absolute high end. I would make him the second favorite behind Bell, ahead of Reddick and Logano. Yeah,
if that's the scenario, that means he's coming off a win at Martinsville.
Momentum is a thing. It's real.
This is going to be, you might even see Bell. You might get a little bit better price on Bell than we expect. I was thinking Bell was going to be like a plus 150 and then probably get a Blaney in that plus 220 range. But if Blaney just blows their doors off in a very, in a fashion like he did last year, where there was no question who the fastest car was, do they both open too? And then you're going to see Reddick open the next.
You could see a plus. You could see a plus 160, plus 180. Reddick at plus 280, and then Logano the long shot in that 4.5, 5, depending on the theoretical hold that gets built in based on the book.
Yeah, I think that's best case scenario for, the two best cars that I can see could go to Phoenix. Out of all of these 8 cars, I do think that it's Bell and Blaney. I don't even think it's close. I would have to say Reddick and Chase Elliott would kind of be that next tier. Larson and Byron, they qualify so well, but they're never the cars that are flying through the field. They usually just kind of qualify up front, and then they just stay and they hold guys off. But I think with a short track package, Bell has really set himself apart. It's crazy to sit here and say that we don't trust Larson and Byron at Phoenix when they've been kind of running 1-2 or at least in the top 5 constantly. They just haven't gone out and kind of dominated or driven through the field. Remember, Kyle Larson won that Vegas race last year that Joey Logano won. He had 3 weeks to get ready for Phoenix, and he came out there and he wasn't even the same zip code as Ryan Blaney. I remember when they unloaded off the truck, I'm sitting here thinking, maybe Larson's going to have it. We were holding Larson tickets. Maybe Larson's going to have it. And he was 2 or 3 tenths off of Blaney as soon as they unloaded. Cliff's like, bring it back. We got a lot of work to do. And at that point, there was no chance at beating Ryan Blaney. So, that still kind of is still fresh in my mind. You got to be excited if you're this 12 team, just with the opportunity, the speed that they've had week in and week out. It'll be interesting. And hopefully for our the 25-1 that we're sitting on, he can at least bring some speed this weekend.
Hey, the other scenario I'll lay out too. Again, we sound like a broken record, but we know Reddick and Logano are already there. There's a real, I won't say realistic, but there is a plausible scenario where Christopher Bell runs into some issues and Christopher Bell ends up on the outside looking in, and it's Byron and Larson that are there. In that scenario, Larson opens as the favorite, but we're talking about a logjam. And along the same lines, if we're looking at Reddick, Logano, Bell, and I guess throw somebody else in there, I mean, there's a chance that Larson could open the favorite as well. I'd have no problems fading Kyle Larson at Phoenix with the right prices, with the right drivers, but so many permutations of these guys when we have this discussion about 8 legitimate threats to try and win this weekend. In my opinion, there are more drivers that can win this weekend in Martinsville that have a legitimate shot to win next weekend in Phoenix.
I agree. I would agree with that. The other thing, too, to throw in there, if Blaney doesn't make it, Blaney's going to be running up front at Phoenix. That's not going to be a surprise to anybody. He was the fastest car the day that Logano won the championship. I mean, basically Logano got out front and Blaney passed 3 drivers and then just stayed there like his wingman. Like, you got to get by me to pass Logano, and I'm not passing Logano. Everyone
needs a lead blocker. And in that case, it was, Brian Blaney being the consummate teammate that took on much more of an F1 feel to it than we were accustomed to in NASCAR, that nobody was getting to Logano's bumper.
No, no one passed Blaney all day. So once Blaney got to second, it was like, okay, just don't screw it up, And we were sitting there holding him at 20-1.
Of course, and we knew he wasn't going to push it.
Yeah, and he wasn't going to push. So
we'll see what we have. But just a little bit of a thought process. We kind of peel back the curtain in terms of the way that we would approach some of the outright numbers that are there. If you don't happen to have some Blaney and Chase Elliott exposure, again, don't go nuts, but Werme and I would give you the full sign off on both of those drivers. Yep. Yes, Belk at 3-1 could offer some value by the time we get to Phoenix. Not for me to take that short a price, because there is still a scenario where Bell doesn't get there. And I don't feel I'm stealing enough in terms of win equity backing him at 3-1 right now.
Also, there were 2 cautions brought out in the spring that were incidents on track. They were both Chris Bell. So little something to keep in mind. A little Worm McNugget. I don't know if that's. Work?
Can you steal that from Larry Mack? Friend of the program,
I don't know.
Larry
I'll
Mack?
ask him next time we talk to him.
All right, that's fair. All right, we're waving the green, white, checkered flag on stage 2. You can follow Chris on social media at ChrisWormy15. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, be sure to follow Bet the Board Pod on social media at Bet the Board Pod for all of your NASCAR, college football, and NFL needs. And Worm, we'll break a little bit of news here before we get into stage 3. The brain trust that is you and me have decided to put our heads together. And for the first time in our illustrious Stay Green history, we will do a live show for the championship next weekend at Phoenix. We've decided that 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific is the prime window. Now, for those folks that go, hey, look, I work, I have family commitments. Look, we get it. The podcast will be available for you on Friday to download it in its normal time and manner from your preferred platform. But should you want to try and get the best of the number, we'll do some live betting, relatively speaking, bet into some of the numbers that are out there and widely available on the show. We'll also take questions from our listeners, and we'll share this throughout social media, live on X. Worm does the pre-race poll in a similar format, and so we want to give all the listeners a chance to interact with us live on the air in a predetermined time slot, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, where Werme and I can interact with all of you guys, especially the most loyal Stay Green listeners that have been with us for multiple seasons, or if you're just landing on us for the first time during the course of the NASCAR postseason. So Werme, it's taped to live, or whatever the hell they call it in media parlance. So you got to be on your best behavior.
Okay. Yeah. What time is hair and makeup? Do I have to
I mean, look, I have a little bit of a compact that I use around here to take the shine off the forehead, because when the lights are on, they get a little bit bright. You sweat a little bit on that upper lip. You sweat a little bit on the crevices around your nose. And, you may be aspiring to be a media superstar, so you may need a hair and makeup guy down the road. We know you have the best hair in the business, but the makeup can get a little bit dicey, especially when you have a newborn, some crow's feet around there, and you're sleep deprived going in. I can see those bags already form underneath your eyes, and they're only going to get a little bit worse as you get older.
I was looking in the mirror the other day. My hairline's in a little bit of a recede, not bad. I was like, God,
it happens.
The minute I start looking like Mel Kiper, I am going bald. I'm not going to be the Mel Kiper of NASCAR.
You're going to shave it. There's no way you're shaving it all off. I can't see a
No,
scenario.
I know. But if it gets I'm not going to hang on to something that's just on retreat. That's just not going to happen.
Sometimes
I think a live show would be good. Just see what kind of interaction we can get, answer some questions, maybe fire live, watch the lines move very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. We'll bet into some of the national markets. And for those folks that have a little bit more of a limited offering available at some of the shops that we've leaned into throughout the course of the season, we can have some fun and take advantage of that, interact with you guys, allow you to get the best of the numbers. So if you have any questions, by all means, slide into Werme's DMs. Let them know ahead of time. You can tweet at us, and we'll try and get to those first. Hopefully we have a good amount of a live audience. I know you have your core group that's with you every Sunday for the pre-race poll, even during football season, which I can't quite seem to understand, but hey, more power to you.
I've never heard of football, so.
Yeah, apparently not. But all right, on to stage 3. Martinsville, the paperclip. We come here in the spring. We come here in the fall. The track races a little bit differently, but this time there is a wrinkle thrown into the mix, if you want to believe it. NASCAR, to their credit, is going to try a different tire compound. We're led to believe that there could be some fall off. Now, we've been promised fall off before during tests throughout the course of the year. It's a lot different than when you have 30 cars on track. It starts to rubber up. You got practice, you get qualifying, and everything else that goes into it. In your opinion, are you changing anything in terms of your handicap to account for tire wear? Do you give a guy that's known for managing his equipment a slight bump in terms of your pre-week determinations in a Denny Hamlin, or is it business as usual? I care more about what guys have done at Martinsville in the past, and I don't care that much about this new tire that could have increased fall off that could potentially be a game changer.
Yeah, right now it's still just trying to predict where the market's going to go. I try not to have too many preconceived notions when it comes to practice and qualifying, because then all of a sudden you could see something with lap times in practice and go quickly switch into confirmation bias mode and go, yeah, I knew I was right. And then maybe kind of start down a path where, could be a little bit misleading. I will say this, that with fall off, there are certain drivers that I think are better at holding on to their tires. They're better at maybe giving up a little bit on the short run in hopes of, once things get strung out, make moves. Now, in the past, what we've seen here at Martinsville is no one really, once it got strung out, there was really no passing until the leader hit lap traffic. And then that's when you'd start to see this. Yeah, you'd start to see a 2-second lead get down to 1.5 to 1.2 to 1.1, and that's only because these guys are fighting so hard to stay on the lead lap that they don't put up as much of an effort with the second driver that's coming through. So what I'm hoping is that we see enough fall off where it kind of it makes handling more important. Like, how well can you work through lap traffic? Not 10 laps in, not 20 laps in, but 40, 50, 60, 70 laps into a run. Who looks good? Now, you're going to have to give up a little bit on the short run in order to see that long run speed. So you're still going to need the race to kind of fall your way. You can't have a bunch of cautions towards the end of the race, need a 40 or 50 lap run for your car to come in. So you're definitely going to have to make sure that you're weighing short run probability versus the likelihood of a long run. And but there are some guys that just tend to make it work, and they're the guys at the top of the odds board as well.
And we'll get to the guys at the top of the odds board, but we may as well start in a somewhat logical spot with the two drivers that have indeed already clinched. So they don't race With the same level of pressure on them as their 6 compatriots, that being Joey Logano, priced at 16-1. As far as Logano is concerned, driver of the 22, he scored 10 consecutive top 10s at Martinsville. It's the longest active streak. 31 career races at the half-mile short track. Logano has 1 win, 11 top 5s, and 19 top 10 finishes. If he somehow scores a top 10 this weekend, it will tie him with Dale Earnhardt Sr. for 6th on the list of all-time consecutive top 10s at Martinsville. No finish worse than 6th in his last 5 trips, back-to-back 100-plus driver ratings. 4 of those 5 races, he's also started outside the top 10, so he's used strategy and everything else. You look at some of his key speed metrics, more or less 5th or 6th across the board. And then Tyler Reddick, 30-1 a long shot. I mean, his victory at Homestead, as we talked about at the top, sends him into the championship 4 for the first time, gives 23-11 their first opportunity to win a NASCAR Cup championship. Only 2 top 15 finishes in 9 Martinsville starts, but he did come home with his best finish career-wise in the spring, so maybe he's starting to figure it out a little bit. But 16-1 on Logano, 30-1 on Reddick. Anything stand out to you with those 2 drivers?
Well, I can tell you the 2 things that are going to stand out between Joey Logano and Tyler Reddick is probably their sleep score every night. I imagine that they are resting easy, just knowing that they have punched that ticket to Phoenix. I definitely don't like Tyler Reddick. This is not a place that's been kind to him over these last 5 races here at this track. I don't anticipate him, I don't think he's going to finish like multiple laps down and be non-existent, but as close to non-existent as possible.
So he's going to pull a Joey Logano at Homestead is what you're expecting from Tyler Reddick this week?
Unless his boss, Denny Hamlin, says, no, I need you up there mixing it up, racing these guys hard, gives me a better chance. I don't know that that's really going to be the case for 23XI. I don't think that that's a high on their list. However, for Joey Logano, I do think it's going to be important that he's mixing it up there in the top 10. Ryan Blaney is kind of doing this naked, and not that Denny pushed Reddick to the win or anything like that, but on those late race restarts, you want to be able to look to your right or your left or in your rearview mirror and see someone that is going to help you out or at least help you get to victory lane. And not that the 45 and the 11 were working directly together. I just think that they race each other differently. You can't say that. And I'll be the first to say that Denny Hamlin acted really upset after this race, but I can tell you that he was really happy to see that 45 team in victory lane. So
not as happy as he'd have been if he drove his own damn car.
I agree, but he definitely played a very dejected Denny Hamlin, which I understand, but there's also this side of this where he's the team owner. So I anticipate Joey Logano to run well. I don't think he's going to win, but maybe if there's some top 5 or top 10 prices, I certainly think he's going to be up there. And, if you can go back to 2 years ago when he won the championship, you could say, oh, well, when he won at Vegas, how did he do? Well, he started 12th that year. His average running position was 10th, and he finished 7th. So he was mixing it up in the top 10. It was not like he was non-existent. So I definitely like Logano much more than I like Tyler Reddick this week.
What have you seen out there for Logano in some of the derivative markets? I mean, top 10, I think we're going to get priced out, but I could see making a slight case for the 22 as a top 5 car, given that seems to be I won't say a ceiling, but could easily be a guy that runs 3rd to 7th all day. And you'd like to be sitting at a plus 250 price tag to at least have a little bit of exposure there.
Yeah, that's kind of that top 5 number. I don't see the top 3 being possible because I do think that a lot of the guys on the outside looking in are going to kind of be running 1st through 4th. And I also think, at Martinsville, you don't want to be beating and banging. If Denny Hamlin is behind Joey Logano,
you don't need to make enemies is what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any reason for him to be out there mixing it up. So top 5 might be a little bit aggressive, but I think that there might be an opportunity for some matchups if he's matched up against guys that he typically wouldn't be matched up against. Maybe take a shot there because he qualifies well, and clearly this has just been a place where he finds a rhythm and can finish inside that top 10.
2 drivers above the cut line with a little bit of wiggle room. Christopher Bell, 14-1. William Byron, 7-1. Mentioned earlier the magic number for Christopher Bell, 34 points. Gets him across the finish line and a seat at the table at Phoenix. Leads all drivers this year with 14 top 5s and 22 top 10s. Both are a career high for Bell. as far as his next-gen speed metrics in Martinsville, inside the top 10 in total speed ranking and eighth in driver rating. Meanwhile, for William Byron, won here in the spring. He led the 1-2-3 Hendrick finish, won 2 of the last 5 races in Martinsville. Hasn't finished worse than 6th in the last 5 races this season. So while he hasn't shown race-winning speed, as you mentioned, he has kind of become the model of consistency, and I'll call it Tyler Reddick light for what Reddick was doing during the summer months. Next-gen speed metrics in Martinsville, lucky 7s across the board. 7th in total speed ranking, 7th in driver rating, 7th in average running position, 7-1 to win the race. William Byron or Christopher Bell, either of these guys catch your eye in the pre-week.
He's also 7-1 to win the championship.
Go figure.
Now, the Chris Bell, a lot of people are probably looking at this number saying, "Ooh, Chris Bell, short track. He's won here at Martinsville." That's a handsome number. And yes, on the surface, it is. However, Chris Bell is 29 points to the good. I think he is just trying to get his ass to Phoenix. And I think he'll qualify well. I don't think he'll take many risks. I don't think he'll race anybody super hard unless he's required to do so. I think most of the time he will be saving his stuff, at least, especially if we have fall off. If there's fall off, I know that Adam Stevens will be in his ear saying, "Hey, we're going to run you long. Make sure you're saving your stuff. You're going to save your brakes. You're going to save your tires." And I anticipate them just kind of running a very conservative race. They have enough speed in that race car to just have an average run and get it done. So this win price, man, it's really hard when you're listening to the guy you have invested in the outright market. And let's just say it's Christopher Bell. And you hear the crew chief saying, "Hey, slow down, save your stuff. Don't worry about passing this guy. We're locked in." That is one of the worst feelings. You kind of feel like an idiot for placing that outright bet. You were goaded into playing that number that just seems a little bit out of the ordinary. So I would say there's maybe some other ways you can cash in on Chris Bell if you think he's going to be consistent. And then speaking of consistent, William Byron, he just kind of runs well here. You won this race in the spring. He didn't take the lead till about 100 to go, or I think maybe a little less than 100 to go. It was pretty much Hendrick Motorsports 1, 2, 3, almost 4 with Alex Bowman. I just haven't, at that point in the season, William Byron was almost the fastest car week in and week out and winning races. Clearly, we just haven't seen that out of him. We've seen more speed out of the 5. So I'm a little hesitant in William Byron. Last year, he was in a spot where he needed to have a good run in order to advance to Phoenix, and he wasn't able to get it done. He just kind of ran mid-pack all day long.
Yeah, he wasn't fast. He wasn't fast at all. I mean, 13th is where he came home, and in the spring last year, he came home 23rd. So
yeah, so it's I would say that first race that he won in this next gen car, that was just a whiff on NASCAR. There was maybe one pass all day, but he did race with Chase Elliott in order to kind of get that win. But I just you got to have some speed, and we just didn't see it out of Byron as much last week as I anticipated. And I'm not saying that they're panicked, but I think that there's other drivers that have more upside this week than this 24 car.
Well, we talk about upside, and there are 4 drivers who have paths to get into the Final Four at Phoenix. One a little bit more straightforward, and Kyle Larson. I think that's part of the reason his number is 5.5 to 1 in the outright market. 2 drivers, or I guess I should say 2 short shots that are going to have to win, or something really weird is going to need to happen. And Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney, history working against them unless they win the race. And then there's Chase Elliott, priced at 10 to 1. I mean, look, Denny Hamlin, 5 career wins in Martinsville, most amongst active drivers, but he hasn't won here since 2015. So it may as well have been a completely different NASCAR era where Denny Hamlin drove his car into victory lane. Last win this season for the 11 car came back at Dover. Last 5 qualifying results at Martinsville, good, not great. And next-gen speed metrics, good, not great, to warrant a 4 to 1 price. Kyle Larson, second here in the spring. 3 top 5 finishes, including a win in his last 4 Martinsville starts. He sat on the pole twice in the last 4 trips to Martinsville. Speed metrics during the next-gen era, best speed ranking, best average running position, best average driver rating. Ryan Blaney, you mentioned he won last year's playoff race in Martinsville, has 9 top 5 finishes and 17 Cup starts at this iconic track. And he's done it without great starting position. 9th here in the spring, 11th in the fall, 31st, 4th, and 12th. And he's pretty much 2nd or 3rd in a lot of the key metrics we look at. And then, of course, there is Chase Elliott, third in the spring, 11 top 10s at Martinsville. The only track where he's got more top 10s is actually Kansas. He's run the most laps in the top 5 at Martinsville in the next-gen era amongst any Cup driver. Last 8 starting spots for the 9 car, 3rd, 14th, 24th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 5th, and 8th. That, of course, predates the next gen. And from a speed ranking standpoint, consistent metrics across the board in the top 5. When we look at these 4 drivers, who are you buying? Who are you selling? Who are you holding?
Well, I think these are the guys that are going to be racing for the win, and I don't even think it's close. I expect Kyle Larson to qualify well and have a gutty performance. Where I do think that there could be a little bit of a chink in the armor for this 5 team could be if we see a ton of fall off. Where Kyle Larson has struggled here in Martinsville is not in the short run. It's laps like 35 to 70 is where we've seen him fall off a little bit.
Yep.
Now he's gotten much better, but is that the car or the tire not wearing out? Or is that just he's gotten better? So we're going to know this weekend. We will have a 45-minute practice. We're not going to have an A and B group. We're going to have just 45 minutes. You're going to see all the cars on the track. You're going to see long runs. You might even see some qualifying runs. I think that it'll be really important that this 5 team gets out there and makes a 55 or 60 lap run to see if they need to make that car better in the long run. At this point in the week, that's a pretty short price for a guy that could have a little bit of fall off. Denny Hamlin at Martinsville. Yeah, he's going to be solid. And in fact, the last time he won was Chase Elliott's first Cup race. That's your second Werme McNugget for the evening.
Look at that. I mean, you have officially gone above and beyond the normal level of research that you do for this show, which is next to 0.
No, I just been sober for 3 weeks, so I just got all this energy.
It's like the George Costanza effect. He decides he's going to go with the abstinence route, and suddenly he becomes a nuclear physicist of sorts.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Of course, the best. Anyway, I think Denny may be a little bit overvalued. However, for the same reason that I think Larson could struggle, if that happens, this makes Denny that much better. The issue with Denny that I have is just a little bit inconsistent. Even when he looks good in practice, like we saw in Las Vegas, did not have that same speed. Come back to Homestead. The fact that he gave up that lead to Blaney with 2 to go. I mean, you're in control of the race with 2 to go.
Uncharacteristic for the 11.
I could not believe it. That to me is not Denny Hamlin. That's something.
That's racing
tight.
In that car. It's racing tight, in my opinion. But he also, to your point, hasn't shown necessarily a ton of speed. So if you're starting to second guess everything in the organization, you can't go out there and race the way that we have grown accustomed to with the 11 in some of these high leverage spots. Yeah,
it's just 4 is just short. I could see 6. I thought that they would kind of all open kind of this 4 to 6 range. Denny is a little overvalued, I think, at this point, because if Denny's going to be good, it's going to be laps. It'll be those later laps. It'll be 40 to 80 where Denny will be good. So any kind of short run, we could see him get pushed around a little bit, like we saw with Blaney last year. Now, Ryan Blaney, we're seeing.
Okay, I'll ask you this, because I think both of us, we've made a case for Ryan Blaney being relevant, not just this week, but also a legitimate threat still at this point to win the whole damn thing.
Yes.
Ryan Blaney goes out there in practice, has the fastest car, puts the car on the pole. How much shorter does the number get that's currently priced at 4 to 1? I mean, we're not talking about Blaney going off at 5 to 2 like Kevin Harvick at Phoenix.
No.
Maybe it's plus 350. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, the same with Denny, right? Like, how much lower can these prices go? Because you're also making the assumption when you're going to drop the price that much that Kyle Larson's not going to qualify well, that Chase Elliott's not going to qualify well, that Chris Bell isn't going to qualify well.
Yep, exactly.
Byron's not going to qualify well. So I think some of these early numbers, the short ones like Blaney, Larson, Hamlin, there's no reason to rush and go bet those because they're just not going anywhere. The Larson rule last week or the last few weeks is he's opened at 3 or 3.5, and he's kind of stayed there until the race kicked off. There was never any fluctuation in that number, no matter whether he looked good in practice or bad in practice. So the same goes for these guys. I think you just wait and see. If one of them jumps off the page to you after practice, well, that's the one you go with. But I think picking one of those 3 drivers right now this week, If you had to pick one, I would take Blaney. He would probably have my endorsement, but ultimately I would say just wait till after practice and qualifying. Chase Elliott's a little different. This is a guy we have not pulled the trigger yet, but he would be my first guy to fire on. There's only, kind of very few 10-1 still out there available. I'm trying to think back. Was there a driver in the last couple of years that didn't show a ton of speed on 1.5 miles? Maybe let's just say he won 1.5 miles throughout the season, and then showed up at Homestead, a track where he's been pretty average, and showed a lot of speed, led a lot of laps, and arguably had the best car, and then went on to win at Martinsville, one of their best tracks, and then go on to win at Phoenix. I think we saw that with Ryan Blaney last year, and I'm starting to see a little bit of the same thing with Chase Elliott. Where in the hell did this 9 car come from last week? I mean, this was not an accident. This car went to the front and did not get past. And when it happened, it was usually kind of a weird situation, or if it was a restart. I think 10-1 is actually the best price. Even 8-1 is not bad, because if we do see him qualify like he has here in the past, you're talking about a top 3 rows qualifying position at one of his best tracks, a place where he has won to get into the final race and then went on to win the championship. So I am big on Chase Elliott, and I've been a Chase Elliott, I don't want to say hater, but I've been as critical of Chase Elliott this entire season. And I think he could absolutely get it done. It would not shock me if he is the best Hendrick car this weekend.
That's a fair way to look at it, and what poetic justice it would be in race 35, getting Chase Elliott across the finish line for a season-long best bet. Over 1.5 wins. We got 2 more bullets in the chamber for the 9 car, but if the 9 doesn't win this weekend, I'm not optimistic that he's going to win in Phoenix.
I don't like him in the top 10 next week.
To try and get us the dub there. You can follow Chris on social media at Chris Werme 15. I'm Todd Fuhrman. Follow me there as well. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Wormser, we have been the model of consistency when it comes to our best bet. You want CLV, you want to beat the market into oblivion, we are your guys. 50 to 60 cents on the norm. Our listeners come in, they help set the price tag. Hasn't mattered of late. Martin Truex Jr. may as well have been out to lunch, because he was about as irrelevant as they came last week when it came to his overall performance on race day. So when we look at the top 3s, we look at the top 5s, we've covered the outrights. We mentioned some championship bets that we think are worth nibbles for our loyal listeners. From a best bet standpoint, anything really jumping off the page to you before we see cars on track this weekend at Martinsville?
Well, I think there is one matchup. I do think that they have the wrong guy favored in this Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney matchup. I think Ryan Blaney should be the favorite there. So he's even money against Denny Hamlin. I like that bet. I don't even care if Blaney qualifies 11th again. It did not take him long to get back into the top 5, and it certainly didn't take him long to pass Denny Hamlin on the outside here last year as he beat the brakes off the field. I anticipate more of this. If you go back and look at this season, I'm trying to find a race where I didn't think that Ryan Blaney was arguably one of the best cars. Homestead, clearly one of the best cars. Vegas, poor qualifying, was working his way up through the field, arguably one of the best cars. Kansas, probably the best car. Darlington, who knows? I mean, I imagine he would have been a good car. So if you're just looking for speed in your race car, which is just something you have to have in the playoffs in order to...
Was that Darlington 1 or 2 where he finished outside the top 30?
Oh, Darlington 2 when he made it a lap and a half.
Oh man!
So I think
the Southern 500 as he did.
We're entering, his best track and arguably the most speed we've seen out of him this year. Even qualifying hasn't even though he hasn't qualified well, it has not been an issue for him to find the front. And this team on pit road was nails all weekend. He was picking up spots. The only time his team helped him was when they were laps down. I don't know if you saw this, but I don't know which teammate it was specifically, were lap cars in between Hamlin and Blaney on that last caution when Larson spun out, and they didn't squeeze up to Hamlin. Or they didn't squeeze up to Ryan Blaney. So Hamlin, that's why he had like that huge lead coming off of pit road, because Hamlin couldn't squeeze up on him because there was at least a teammate of his helping out a lap down, albeit. So I anticipate Ryan Blaney to be really good. There's some 6-1 out there on him. I don't necessarily hate that. And I think he's going to be strong, and I think he beats Denny Hamlin. I think it might only be by a spot or two, but I think the better car needs to be favored there.
I would echo those same sentiments as well. There are some shops that have that matchup priced right around a pick 'em. For me, my numbers on that more in that -115, -120 range in terms of Blaney. So if you're going to give us a true coin flip at even money, more than happy to take it in this particular spot. All right, my good man. Only one of these shows left to go. I'm not sure where the time goes from a preseason preview at Danielle Trotta back in February to the final race of the season. For us next week, a little bit of a live show as we shared with the listeners, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, their chance to watch the Magical Mystery Tour and the carnage. That's what we do. As we put this together, you can watch Werme surf the internet. You can watch me change channels when he decides he's going to go on rambling, and we'll have an opportunity to answer some of your questions as well, to be able to create, the best atmosphere and the grand finale, so to speak, for Stay Green Season 3. Anything else you'd like to share with our loyal listenership before you bid them a fond farewell? And do we dare even dangle out the prospect that maybe we get a magical, mystery guest or something to pop in and share his perspective too?
I mean, yeah, if you got someone in mind, we can at least throw it out there. But
yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll see if we can cue somebody up.
Okay, well, I will say, to kind of recap, we do have Blaney at this 25-1. For the championship. I think Chase at 50 is, certainly worth a nibble as well. And then if you're going to take Chris Bell, I would say 3-1 if you think he's going to advance. Now, he still has to do that. There is risk baked into that 3-1. He is not through. You're going to see that number be shorter when they get to Phoenix, especially if Blaney's not in that field. So, that's I guess that's kind of puts a bow on what we've talked about, because I do think with the tire, it's going to be something different this week. I'm hoping we see fall off in, Freddie Kraft said that there was like 1.5 seconds of fall off on one tire that was,
I heard
30 laps.
I love the NASCAR community. I heard the same shit. We went to Watkins Glen. You know what?
Yeah, that's true.
Didn't race that much different to my untrained eye.
It's going to be 4 seconds to fall off. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. When every car falls off 4 seconds, it falls off the same. The track rubbers up. Look, maybe NASCAR hits a home run here and we get something that unfolds similar to what we saw at Bristol earlier this year. I just don't think at a track like Martinsville, where you're going to have, one racing groove that's going to rubber up pretty quickly, that suddenly you're going to have comers and goers other than the conveyor belt that we've grown accustomed to. But that's why they practice. That's why we reserve the right to change our opinions. And it's why you offer up the pre-race poll every Sunday leading up until the dropping of the green flag to get cars going. So what time can our Stay Green listeners tune in for that on Sunday?
Yeah, so 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. I'm just not going to fight with the NFL. It is amazing how much viewership drops off once the NFL season rolls around. Everyone wants to deal with their pathetic little fantasy football teams or whatever they're called. So.
Shocking. You're having the same struggle getting NASCAR viewers for your pre-race poll that major media networks get for NASCAR playoff races.
Yeah, exactly.
Going head-to-head with NASCAR. So remind me to pull out my mini violin and play it for you.
Yeah, perfect. That'd be great.
So, but hopefully you're doing that in a split screen. You can watch Werme on one screen with the pre-race poll. You can watch all of my NFL breakdowns on CBS Sports HQ from 9 to 10 leading up to kickoff as we break down player props and everything else. But thank you as always, my friend. Great show. Looking forward to doing this live with all of our listeners. Hopefully jumping into the chat, being able to stream on multiple platforms and create some good interaction, answer all of your questions, and have some fun as a celebration from yet another great NASCAR season on track, and of course, stay green as we continue to grow around here. So for Chris Werme, I'm Todd Fuhrman. Best of luck with all of your Martinsville investments, but most importantly, with a Ryan Blaney head-to-head ticket over Denny Hamlin in hand, we'll see you at the window.
One time, baby.